Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's weekly Forex Forecast. Let's kick off with the DXY as we always do. In previous videos, I highlighted the fact that the DXY has traded into a key area of support at the 89.710. I've taken it off this week because I do like to keep my charts clean. I noted in last week's video that we were stuck in a range in the DXY, and this was ahead of CPI data last week. We had inflation coming in last week above expectations, and at the same time we had somewhat of a dovish ECB. About an hour after this data was released, I did post on Twitter that the DXY was looking like it was headed to the 90.60, and we ended the week at the 90.61. So for anybody not already following me on Twitter, I do post updates on the markets as new information comes in during the week on Twitter. So if you'd like some midweek updates on the markets, feel free to join me over there as well. So going into next week, I do favour further advances in the DXY. After the data released last week, we did have a nice rally with momentum. So any pullback in this market will be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key resistance, the upside, the target set at the 91.16. So going into next week, I do favour dollar strength positions, and although it's not a super bullish bias because we're still a little bit choppy, I do have a bullish bias on the DXY going into next week. Euro dollar, just as we were previously sitting at that key area of support in the DXY, we were also sitting at this key area of resistance to 1.22390, highlighted in previous videos. And I highlighted the fact we were really struggling to break above this. Euro dollar was ranging underneath this level just as the DXY was ranging above the key area of support. And with that rally and the inflation data last week, we saw this sell off to the downside. So very simply put, going into next week, I do like this market for further lows. We have some really nice momentum. So any pullback in this market is going to be viewed next week as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 1.1996. The next dollar pair I like is New Zealand dollar. This was a market highlighted in last week's weekly Forex Forecast, and we did start to come down towards the target at the 0.7071, but we haven't yet achieved it. I did post on Twitter an update as New Zealand dollar started to break out last week, and I will be keeping an eye on these markets and other markets for you all during the week on there next week as well. So very simply put, for anybody not already involved last week, what I would like to see are for additional opportunities in New Zealand dollar this week. Any pullback in this area, you can see we have really nice momentum. If we start to get a bear flag here, any pullback is going to be viewed next week as another opportunity to look for short positions down to the next key area of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.7071. And the third dollar pair I like this week is Aussie dollar. Now Aussie dollar was a market highlighted in last week's weekly Forex Forecast for a move to the downside. We pretty much moved sideways, and then we had the sell-off at the end of the week after we had that CPI data coming out and the rally in the DXY. This sell-off did in fact confirm on a break below this low a double top reversal in this market. So very simply put, going into next week, any pullback in this area is going to be viewed once again for anybody not involved as a great opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals in this market down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at 0.7622. Next is crude oil. Now last week we were looking for a target of the 70.56, and we did rally into this. We tested it almost to the pip twice, and we ended the week just above it. We almost closed the week at the 70.56. So very simply put, going into this week, I do still favour further advances to the upside in crude oil. Any pullback in this market next week is going to be viewed as another opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key resistance, the upside and the target set at the 73.12. So moving on to stocks and the stock indices, and starting with the SPX. In previous videos I highlighted the 417191 as an area to look for a bounce to the upside into the 4270.92. We are very close to this target now, so we may get a correction. Any correction would be an opportunity to enter this long towards the 4270.92, but I am expecting this target to be taken out next week now. Once we take this target out, any pullback will once again be viewed in this market as another opportunity to start to look for bullish setups into the next key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 4300.83. Next is the Nasdaq. Now the Nasdaq was a market that I highlighted in last week's video as a market to watch to the upside, that I like the look of this, and we started the week in this area, and I was looking for a move into the 14067.420. We had highlighted this breakout of this range in previous videos, and we are now coming close to achieving this target from previous videos. This is really more of an update in this market, because once this target is taken out, and I expect this target to be achieved next week, I do think there is a risk we see a sell-off in this market. It doesn't mean I would want to go short, but we have had 1, 2, 3, and this would be a final push into the end of this, what looks like a third wave here, although a very short one. And it just means that there is risk involved in long positions once we get to the 14067.42. So I would be looking to book profits in this. And in the Nasdaq, I would prefer to wait and see what happens. Probably leave this until the following week to look for further opportunities. Next is the Dow Jones. Now, interestingly, in the Dow Jones, you can see we also have this range breakout, which we could see previously in the Nasdaq and in the SPX as well. But we haven't really gone anywhere in the Dow Jones. While the SPX has risen and the Nasdaq has risen towards the targets, the Dow Jones has really just corrected and retested. So if the moves are over in the SPX and especially the Nasdaq, then the Dow Jones looks like we could be getting a replay of the moves we've seen in the SPX and in the Nasdaq. So very simply put, the Dow Jones is right at a place now where I would be looking for bullish setups in this market into the next key of resistance, the upside, the target set at the 35127.16. And to wrap up the stocks and the stock indices, we're going to look at the Nifty. The Nifty is a market I've been highlighting in previous videos ever since we broke out of this inverse head and shoulders. And last week we rallied and we took out the target almost to the pip at the 15829.15. So very simply put, going into next week, I do like this market for further advances to the upside. Any pullback, and I'd like to see a pullback first, but any pullback would be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish positions in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 15987.45. And finally, the non-US dollar pairs that I like going into next week, starting with New Zealand Swiss franc. New Zealand Swiss franc is selling off to the downside. We do have some nice momentum after breaking out of this intraday range here. So very simply put, going into next week, any pullback in this market will be viewed as a great opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.6368. The next market I like is New Zealand CAD. This was a market highlighted in last week's weekly Forex forecast, and I highlighted the 0.87390 for you to look for a potential bounce to the downside into the 0.8593. We did have a really nice bounce from this area and we've started to sell off. So very simply put, going into next week, for anybody not already involved in this market, any correction in this market will once again simply be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside and the target highlighted from last week at the 0.8593. The next market I like is Pound New Zealand. So you can start to see that New Zealand weakness is a theme that I'll be looking at going into next week. We are approaching the next target, so I would like to see a pullback first in this market. Any pullback would be viewed as a great opportunity to look for bullish setups. First of all, into the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.9855. Once we've taken out this target, and we may take it out first and then correct, I will be looking up towards the second key of resistance, the upside and target 2 at the 1.9981. The next market I like is Pound Yen. Pound Yen was a market highlighted in last week's weekly Forex forecast video, and I highlighted the 154.44 as an area to look for a pullback and bullish reversals to the upside. I noted that we are forming here a bull flag. This is just a correction. It's been going on for a little while, but this is really just the correction as it stands of this rally to the upside, this bull flag here. So very simply put, going into next week, this is now a great place to start to look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 156.51. The next market I like is Franc Yen. Now, Franc Yen is a market highlighted in previous videos. We had this A, B, C, and then we started to rally to the upside. We came just shy of the target, and this is a little bit more choppy than some of the other markets we've looked at, like the dollar pairs, for example. I do prefer those pairs over Franc Yen going into next week, but I'm going to be keeping my eye on this market. Any pullback in Franc Yen is going to be viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals. I'm going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 122.68. And last but not least is AudCad. Now, AudCad was a market highlighted in last week's weekly Forex forecast video. However, we just moved sideways. We were just chopping, we didn't go anywhere. Very similar to what we looked at in Aussie dollar, we have started to develop here a double top pattern, but unlike Aussie dollar, we have not yet broken the confirmation, which is this low down here. So very simply put, going into next week, the analysis remains the same as last week. I am still favoring this to the downside. What I would like to see is if we can come down and break this low and confirm this double top, any pullback after that would be viewed as an opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals in this market, down to the next key area of support to the downside and the target highlighted from last week at the 0.9255. So that is it from me for this week, guys. Those are the markets I like the best going into next week, and those are the ones I'll be keeping my eye on and looking for setups in those markets. As always, I won't be trading every market, but I'll be looking for the best setups that appear in those markets next week. A big thank you to everybody who likes, shares, and comments on the content regularly, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far. I want to wish you all a nice weekend, and I want to wish you all the best in your trading next week. The only thing left to say is take care, and don't forget to trade safely.